The Walking Dead, a long-running TV franchise that most people say needed to be put down years ago. Personally, this is one of my favorite TV series ever, so when I heard a new game was releasing, I had to check it out. To my surprise, Walking Dead Destinies was attempting to do the one thing that many of us fans had always wanted to do: change fate. In the show, many fan favorite characters die or are killed, so having a game where we can prevent those things from happening and change history was a fantastic idea, but sadly, the final product was nowhere near what I could have ever imagined. Let's start out with the obvious, the visuals. You can see right from the start that the character models were going to be terrible. As soon as I saw Rick for the first time, I knew it was only going to get worse. Just take a look at him. You can tell that the person is supposed to be Rick, but there is so much detail missing on not just his face, but the entire outfit, that it almost physically hurts to look at. And it doesn't stop there. The other characters look just as bad, with their facial animations contorting into something you would see from The Exorcist. Thankfully, there was enough difference between each character so that there's never any confusion on which character from the show was which. Even still, the lack of polish on the characters is atrocious. I don't understand how devs can see games with high quality models and not want to replicate the same thing for Walking Dead characters. Imagine you're a dev and see a game like Last of Us or God of War and see how those models look, decide to make a Walking Dead game, and then downgrade them to this degree. It makes no sense. The best thing about this game visually is the environment. At least the environments do change and they do a decent job at resembling the iconic areas that are seen throughout the show. Herschel's farm, the prison, and Woodbury all don't look too bad, which helps when you consider how bad the characters themselves look. We move on to the gameplay, the aspect of the game that's supposed to keep us entertained and have us return for multiple playthroughs. Putting it simply, the gameplay sucks too. You play as different characters from throughout the story, all in a third-person perspective, with new members being added to the group as time goes on. The movement itself is stiff as you perform this medium-paced jog as you move from place to place at all times. Even when I gently moved the analog stick, I couldn't get my character to walk, which was actually really weird. Since you can't walk, it's no surprise that there isn't a sprint button either. So essentially, when being chased by zombies or enemies, you always move at the same pace. This doesn't seem like a big deal on the surface, but that means the enemies can catch you from any distance no matter what you do. So let's say you get stuck as you're trying to escape, but you created a huge distance between yourself and the enemies. You should be able to escape without them catching you, right? Wrong. Because you move so slow, the enemies can close the distance faster than normal, making every step you take more important than the last. When you're surrounded by a mixture of humans and zombies, the movement can get annoying really fast. Let's talk about the combat. Or should I say, lack of combat. The main aspect of every zombie game is the killing, and is portrayed terribly in this title. So the two main enemies you'll be fighting are humans and zombies, which makes sense. In order to attack, you could perform melee punches if you didn't have any weapons, and after a couple hits, you could press another button to stab the walker in the head. If you did have a melee weapon, you bash away until you eventually decapitate the enemy. Some of those melee weapons included crowbars, machetes, sledgehammers, fire axes, and more. This all seems nice on the surface, but it's how it feels to perform the actions which is the problem. Every hit, regardless of what you're using, feels slow and clunky. It doesn't matter if you use a crowbar or a hammer, there's no fluidity to the combat. To make matters worse, there's a stamina meter in the left-hand corner by your health bar which decreases as you swing. So the attacking motions themselves are slow, then you add a stamina meter which will slow you down further. You can already see how bad that sounds. After you perform a flurry of melee hits, your heart meter will fill and you'll be able to perform a finisher on the enemy. Having a finisher at the end of your combo is a cool idea, but since they aren't very cinematic, I don't really care about doing it. In addition, it's not automatically activated either, as you have to manually press a button to perform the movement. The whole finisher gimmick is cool, but if you don't continually do the move, you'll eventually forget about it entirely. It's worth noting that once the stamina meter runs out, you can't perform any attacks until it fills back up, adding even more strain on the gameplay. Let's talk about the gunplay. Not too long after starting the game, you gain the ability to start using guns. There's plenty of guns to choose from as you have pistols, revolvers, shotguns, and assault rifles. Now since this is a zombie game, this was the one thing I thought I could count on being perfect, and to nobody's surprise, it wasn't. Similar to the melee weapons, the way it felt to shoot, it just was off. It's hard to describe, but when actually shooting stuff, it just felt cheap. After putting in so many hours into RE4 Remake, I've grown accustomed to above average gunplay, so playing this felt 10 times worse. By far the most frustrating aspect of the gameplay was the aiming. When you aim any gun, the camera zooms in way too close and the camera itself is completely out of whack. There's no way you can aim your gun on your own with this camera. Even with the slightest movement, the camera just spazzes out and then you end up getting hit. So what I had to resort to was using the auto aim and going for strictly headshots. At least with the headshots, they inflicted a lot of damage, making each encounter a whole lot easier. If you insist on not just using headshots, then my piece of advice would be to aim and not move the camera, but instead move your character. By moving the character and not the camera stays in place but the reticle still moves, making the aiming a little bit easier. This method doesn't work well in crowded places, so be sure to keep your distance if you want to try this. As far as the core gameplay, that's really it. There isn't a lot of depth to the combat and mechanics themselves. It's pretty much run from here to there, kill stuff along the way, and you're done. But let's discuss the structure of the game itself. As I mentioned earlier, you start out playing as Rick. This is because the game covers the first 4 seasons of the TV show, with each episode being broken up into missions. Initially, the game just moves you on automatically from mission to mission until you gain access to your first camp. Once you enter camp, you can walk to the RV to access the mission table. Here you can view the expeditions and main missions. The main missions were crafted based off iconic moments in the show, with you possibly bringing someone along for the ride. Most of these weren't anything complex either. They were just kill this, run here, shoot that, grab that, and then return to the start. No depth in any of the levels, just brain dead activities. Once you get an understanding of how the missions flow, then the gameplay gets old quick. Regarding those expeditions on the mission table, they are side things that are going on during your time completing the main missions. I don't know if all of them happened during the main show, but I believe that some of them were actual events that we got to see play out. Either way, what you would do is pick an expedition which would send a group member out on a quest, and then while you're in the middle of a main mission, a prompt would appear. This prompt will present you with a problem for that group member you sent out and force you to choose one of 2 options to rectify the situation. You'll either pass or fail the expedition based on your choice, with you gaining skill points for picking correctly. Other than that, there's no real consequences for picking wrong. So if you didn't care about these and guess wrong every time, the only thing that would happen is you wouldn't gain additional skill points. Since you gain points by completing the main missions, you didn't always have to guess this right. Another mechanic that could have been fleshed out, that wasn't. Speaking of skill points, you may be wondering, what do we use the skill points for? Well, by going to the menu, there's a skill tree based on all the group members in the game. Here you can use the skill points earned in the main missions and expeditions to upgrade various abilities for your character of choice. Some of these included reducing damage or reducing stamina cost, among a variety of other things. As you could probably guess, if players leave the group or are killed, their skill tree becomes inaccessible. So once that person dies, you have to use the points on someone else. The skill points are a nice addition to help improve your favorite character, but since the gameplay is so stale, you may not even care about adding the points. Also, there isn't a lot in the game notifications that tell you you've got points to spend, so if you beat the game without using any of the points, don't be surprised. The lack of content is too glaring to miss, as outside the main missions, there isn't much here. When inside of camp, some group members may have an exclamation point over their head indicating that there's a conflict. These conflicts are between 2 characters that are alive and inside your group, with you having to read a scenario and then decide how to handle the situation. This seems complex, but it's really not. You just have to press a button to choose a character and then move on. It's clear that the idea behind this gameplay is really good, but the execution on creating it was so bad. The ideas and mechanics that are present fit this type of game, but they're not fleshed out enough to make you actually care about most of it. If more money and attention was put into the gameplay, it could have been really fun. Let's discuss the area that the game advertised itself on, the story. The entire premise of this title was that you could change fate, create your own destiny. In order to do this, you play through the events of the story, but at pivotal moments you are presented with a choice. These choices may align with what happened in the show, or may be unique to the situation. Most of the time, it's obvious which decision is from the show and which isn't, but the choice is still up to you. For example, the decision I look forward to the most was the Shane versus Rick confrontation. Spoilers for the show if you haven't seen it, but in the show, Rick kills Shane, but in this game, you have the option for Shane to kill Rick. And for someone like me, whose favorite character was Shane, I jumped on this opportunity. To my surprise, they included boss fights in the game based on your choices. So after choosing to kill Rick, you actually get to fight him. If there was one bright spot in the game, this was it. Again, just like the gameplay we mentioned earlier, the boss fights themselves sucked, but just the concept was so cool. To be able to relive this moment but change history and fight Rick made everything feel so fresh. If the graphics, gameplay, and details were better, these fights could have truly been something else. There are more destiny-defining choices as you move forward throughout the story, but there's still one thing that confused me. They give you the choice to change history, but some things still end up happening regardless of the choices you make. Unless the choice has a larger effect that I was unaware of, if you change how things are done early in the game, that should change the events later on. This was definitely the case, but it wasn't as consistent as you may think. There's obvious moments where you can tell the difference between the show and the game because certain things happen to different people, but sometimes the same things happen to the same characters. Not a huge deal, but it makes everything a little bit more confusing because there's no way to view your relationship with a person or how your choices affects their path. Outside of the choices, the story is still The Walking Dead, so it's going through the biggest moments just with different characters. After you make those important decisions, there isn't much after to surprise you outside of seeing how certain scenarios play out. In the end, I thought the story could have been very detailed and intricate, going into each character in depth and truly giving us players a different perspective of said character that didn't make it very long in the show. Having the ability to rewrite history should have led us to having a unique story that gives an alternate version of what really happened. Instead, we got a watered down plot that was extremely predictable. The last thing I want to mention is the voice acting. The dialogue and voices for almost every character was terrible. Most of the time, I wasn't even paying attention to what they were actually saying as I was laughing at their horrible imitation of the character's voice. Take a quick listen.
That's it! We either take care of this right now, or we just gotta go!
Now hold on, Shane.
You can't tell me you're okay with this! Get your weapons, y'all! Time to grow up!
Shane, that's enough.
You damn right that's enough! Enough risking our lives for a little girl who's gone! Enough living next to a barn full of things that are trying to kill us! Enough! Rick, it ain't like it was before!
It's not our call. We're guests here.
The hell with that, man! The right choice is the choice that keeps us alive! You want those things next to where Lori sleeps? It ain't hard, Rick!
You can't just...
I don't think you can keep them safe. If you all want to live, if you want to survive, you gotta fight for it! I'm talking about fight! Right here, right now!
As you can see, the voices don't line up with the character voices at all. The only one I thought was decent was the voice for Merle, as that wasn't too bad. Other than that, they all sucked. The sounds from gunshots and melee hits weren't good either, as they sounded as if we were hitting something else other than skull and brains. The zombie sounds and human NPC voices aren't good either, as the growls from the zombies don't sound realistic, and the humans say dialogue that consists of only short phrases. All of this seems minute, but it really does make a difference in regards to immersion. The music wasn't memorable either, as the only thing I noticed was the main theme that plays when you boot up the game. Now, the OST for a zombie game doesn't have to be top tier, but they could have put out something better. Overall, Walking Dead Destinies is a poor attempt at recreating an iconic show, but with a surprise twist. Every single aspect from the characters, gameplay, music, and story all needed a larger budget and more detail. There's no sense of immersion present, as I found myself just moseying throughout the game instead of being completely locked in. For those reasons, I'm going to give this game a 4. After my time playing this game, it's clear that the idea is fantastic and the concept is one that I think needs explored, but the execution is just so bad, I can't understand why anybody would pay full price for this game. If you're a big fan of The Walking Dead and would like to buy this, I would wait until the game goes on a deep sale, or maybe it becomes free via PlayStation Plus or Game Pass. For a TV franchise that's so popular, its video games deserve so much better than what's currently out on the market. What did you think of Walking Dead Destinies? Did you play this game, or did you just want to see how bad it really was? Let me know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like or subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hey you! Dumbass! Yeah, you in the tank. Cozy in there?
Who is this? Where are you? Can you see me?
Name's Glenn. There's no time for answers right now. Wait for my signal.